My final 2024 Senate election prediction is not one that you've seen many other channels do, but I have data to back it up. I can tell you guys you are not expecting this. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with the safe states. Safe states are going to go to each party by 12 points or more. We're going to start off with the Democrats. Their safe states are going to be Washington, California, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, New York, and Maine, putting their safe states at 40. Now we're going to go to the Republican safe states. We have Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, Nebraska's special election, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, Indiana, and West Virginia, putting their safe states at 47. Now we're going to go to the likely states. Likely states are states that are going to be determined by 6 to 12 points. We're going to start off with the Republicans. The first likely state for the Republicans that we have is Nebraska. Now historically, Nebraska has been a Republican state, but if we look at the polling between the Republican and the independent Dan Osborne, we see that Deb Fischer, who's the incumbent, is only up 7 points in the latest poll. Now that might be surprising considering Nebraska is a very Republican state, and so I do believe that because Dan Osborne is there, he's really going to be able to tighten up the race. Deb Fischer is not that popular in Nebraska, but I still do believe she's going to win it by a likely margin just because of how Republican Nebraska is. The next likely state that we have is Florida. Now, a big reason why I have this as a likely state is because of the early voting in Florida. We see that in the early voting, Republicans have a 12-point advantage in Florida. And if we look at the early in-person votes, we see Republicans have a 1 million advantage. And one county where you can really see the Republicans are doing really well is Miami-Dade County, which is historically a pretty Democrat county. But in recent years, it has taken a shift to the right. And we see that Republicans are actually up in Miami-Dade County, the largest county in terms of population in Florida. And so that's really big for Scott. And you see that Scott's only leading by 4.5%, but because of these strong early vote numbers, I see Rick Scott winning this by a likely margin. So that's it for our Republican likely margins. Now we're going to go to our Democrat likely margins. The first seat that I have is Virginia. So Virginia is going to be a likely margin for the Democrats. Now, Tim Kaine actually was the vice presidential pick for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, and he is up for re-election in the Senate. We see that Tim Kaine is up by 11.3% over Hung Hao, his Republican challenger. And Hung Hao isn't that bad of a candidate, but we see that Tim Kaine is a pretty popular candidate, and it does look like he's going to be able to win this by a likely margin. The next state that we're going to look at is New Mexico. I also have this as a likely margin. Now, if we look at the polling out of New Mexico, we see that Heinrich, who's a Democrat incumbent, is up by 9.4%. And the reason why he's only up by 9.4% is because of Nella Dominici. She has name recognition in the state. In fact, her father was a prominent Republican senator from the state. And so that's the reason why this is a little closer than, say, states like Virginia or Minnesota. But I do believe that Heinrich will still be able to win this by a likely margin. The next state that we're going to look at is Minnesota. I also believe Minnesota will be a likely state for the Democrats. If we look at the Senate polling, we see that Amy Klobuchar is up by 12.7%, and that is larger than the presidential polling in Minnesota because Amy Klobuchar is so popular in her state. I do believe she's going to be able to win this by a likely margin. So that finishes off our likely margins. Now we're going to go to our lean margins. Lean margins are states that are going to be decided between 3 to 6 points. We're going to start with the Republicans. I believe that Texas is going to be a lean margin for the Republicans. Republicans. If we look at the polling between Ted Cruz and Colin Allred, we see that Ted Cruz is up by 4.1%. Now, back in 2018, when he was up for re-election, he nearly won against Beto O'Rourke by 2.6%. 2018 was a blue wave for Democrats, but Ted Cruz still nearly held on. And so I do believe because of the environment right now that we have, it's a more Republican-friendly environment. I do still see him holding on by a lean margin. The other lean margin that I have for Republicans is the state of Montana. Now, right now, there is a Democrat incumbent, Jon Tester, but right now, Tim Sheehy is up and up big in the polls. We see that in the latest poll, he's up by 4 points, and in the polling average, he's up by 6.5%. And in fact, Jon Tester has been up in fundraising, and still Tim Sheehy is up. And a big reason why he's up is because of this polarized environment that we're in. We see that back earlier in this year, we see that Jon Tester was up, but then Tim Sheehy has really held a consistent lead over Jon Tester. And so for right now, I'm going to put this in the lean margin for Republicans. So that finishes off our lean margins. And I actually don't have any lean margins for the Democrats. So now we're going to just go to the tilt margins for every state. We're going to start off with the Republicans. They only have one tilt margin, and that is Ohio. Now, Ohio is definitely, I think, going to be the closest state in this election. If we look at the polling right now, we see that Sherrod Brown, who's a Democrat incumbent, is only up by 1 point in the RCP average. And Moreno has started to gain on him. We see that early on this year, Brown was up by pretty big margins, but now his lead has shrunk and he's only up by 1 point. And the reason why Sherrod Brown is doing this well is because he's a popular incumbent, but Ohio has had a big shift to the right, and so for that reason, I see Bernie Moreno narrowly winning the state by a tilt margin. The next state that we're going to look at is the state of Arizona. If we look at the Senate polling out of Arizona, we see that Ruben Gallego, who is the Democrat, is up by 4 points against Kari Lake. Now, Kari Lake ran a failed gubernatorial bid in 2022, and she doesn't have good name recognition, and that's probably why Gallego is up this big in battleground Arizona. We see that if we look at the presidential polling, Trump is up by 2.3%. And so the reason why I'm going to give this by a tilt margin and not a lean margin to Ruben Gallego is because of the early voting in Arizona. We see that 2 million ballots have been cast, and 42% of them have been from registered Republicans and only 33% from registered Democrats. Now, I do want to say something about this number. Some of these voters are going to cross over for Ruben Gallego. Republicans in Arizona have a problem with McCain Republicans who basically vote for Democrats nowadays. And so for that reason, I have Gallego only winning it by tilt margin just because of the extraordinary early vote data for Republicans in the state of Arizona. Now we're going to go to the state of Nevada. We see that right now in the Nevada Senate polling, Jackie Rosen is up by 4.3%. If we look at the presidential polling, we see that Trump is actually up by 1.5%. And in the early vote data, Republicans are actually leading Democrats by 5 points, an extraordinary amount. And so this is definitely going to be good for Republicans, considering that in past elections, Democrats have been up in the early vote. So for that reason, I only have Jackie Rosen winning it by a tilt margin. Again, tilt margins are from anywhere between 0 to 3 points. I could see Jackie Rosen winning by 3 points, but that would still be a tilt margin. Now we're going to go to the state of Wisconsin. Now, right now, Tammy Baldwin, the Democrat incumbent, is only up by 1 point. And for a long time, that was not the case. Baldwin was up by 6.7% in August. But now, the race has totally tightened with Baldwin only holding a 1-point lead. And you can see the Democrats have kind of gotten scared about this race as Democrat donors prop up a far-right candidate in the Wisconsin Senate race, basically to take votes away from Eric Hovde, the Republican challenger in Wisconsin. I really do think that this race is going to go down to the wire, but partially because Democrats have propped up a candidate that could take votes away from Eric Hovde, I see Tammy Baldwin narrowly holding onto her seat by a tilt margin. The next state that we're going to look at is the state of Michigan. Right now, Slotkin is up by 3 points. Now, this is an open race, and the Democrat Slotkin and the Republican Rogers are both pretty good candidates for their parties. And so this race, I really do believe, is going to be close because we see that Harris is only leading by 0.7% in the polling average. And right now, I actually see Trump winning the state, but Alyssa Slotkin does have an appeal that Harris does not have in the state. She was a House representative from Michigan and a pretty popular one too. And so I do believe because of her appeal, I do believe that she's going to be able to get some Trump crossover votes, and I do think she's going to win by a tilt margin. Now we're going to go to the Pennsylvania Senate race. Now, in the 2024 presidential election, Pennsylvania is really the keystone state. I really do believe that whoever wins Pennsylvania has a really good chance of winning the White House. If we look at the polls in Pennsylvania, we see that Bob Casey is up by 2.4%. And like Wisconsin, this was not always the case. Casey was up by 7.6% in late August, but now his lead has shrunk to a mere 2.4%. Now, Dave McCormick, the Republican challenger, has really ran a really good campaign. He's a more moderate Republican, and I think that's going to help him in this race. We also see that in Pennsylvania, Trump is up by 0.4%. Now, like Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan, I do believe that Pennsylvania will also split ticket, and that Bob Casey will be reelected by a tilt margin just because of how popular Bob Casey is in the state, and he definitely has an appeal in Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of these races could really go either way, but as of right now, I do think Democrats are favored in Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So guys, this is my final prediction. Republicans will get 52 seats to the Democrats 48. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe. Comment your thoughts or suggestions in the comment section down below. Shout out to Diana Barbie, our first channel member. If you would like to become a member, you can join near my channel logo. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.